I think that the government shouldn't intrude in some of these matters. I'm not for abortion, but I think it's not the place of the state to punish women for deciding to have an abortion.
The decision whether to have an abortion or not have an abortion should be left to every single individual human. Like, to me, something like this isn't necessarily like a political right or something like that. It's more of a human right.
Those are Arizona voters reacting to the state Supreme Court decision to uphold a ban on almost all abortions. The biggest fights of 2024 are all converging on Arizona. First, the immigration debate, and now the battle over reproductive rights. And let's not forget, this could be the state that decides control of the Senate and the presidency. For more, I'm joined by Victoria DeFrancesco Soto, the Dean of the Clinton School of Public Service at the University of Arkansas and an MSNBC political analyst, and Tim Miller, host of the Bulwark podcast and the former communications director for Jeb Bush. Friends, it is good to see you both. Tim, I am just so fascinated by Arizona. Seems to be just a prime example of the way Republicans have really backed themselves into a corner on the issue of abortion.
Yeah, and just what horrible timing also for Donald Trump to put out a statement Monday morning saying that he wants to leave this issue up to the states, thinking that was going to be his get out of jail free card. Then the next day, one of the most important states for him makes this just absolutely draconian 19th century literally decision. So look, I think that abortion is going to be a problem for him everywhere. And in Arizona, it hits a confluence of a couple of factors. He has, number one, the Republicans, really, not just Trump, the whole Republican Party in a state that they used to dominate has been bleeding in Maricopa County, where Phoenix is, spent a lot of time there. And there's a lot of, center right, I would even say, voters that are McCain voters, Flake, Ducey, that maybe consider themselves pro-life personally, but they're not for 0-week bans. They're not for making a mother carry their rapist's child to term. These sort of very draconian bills. And those types of voters had already been moving against Trump, already been moving against the Republicans. And now this crashes down, and that's going to accelerate that move even more. And I think that really, you're going to see it the most dramatically there in Maricopa County, maybe anywhere in the whole country.
Victoria, to just build upon Tim's point, I remember being in Arizona during the midterms and talking to voters as they were running in and out of the grocery store and asking them about this very issue. And they framed it just as Tim did, which was a question of government overreach, right? This is too extreme. They've gone too far. You see momentum on the ground in Arizona. There's a group, Arizona for Abortion Access. They say they've already gathered more than enough signatures to get an abortion measure on the ballot in 2024. Looking at it in its totality, what does that signal to you?
I see two things here, Alicia. And first of all, let me preface this by saying I'm an Arizonan. I am a native of the borderlands of Arizona. And to understand the roots of Arizona politics, it's really remembering that it is a Western state and really a libertarian state at its core. So that clip that you first played of that voter, of that gentleman, that is the face of that Western libertarian. So I think that this overreach from the Arizona Supreme Court will have an effect on some of those voters who may have held their nose and voted for Trump again. That is going to have an effect. I'm not saying necessarily of going to vote for Joe Biden, but perhaps staying home. So there's that one piece of it, of that center right. The other one is the mobilizing effect, right? The mobilizing effect among the Democratic base, the Democratic leaners, the young voters who don't have the practice of voting and maybe feeling disenchanted, aren't connecting with Biden, but they see this draconian take on a fundamental right. That can help push them. You can't assume this in and of itself is going to do that. There's going to have to be a lot of mobilization between now and the November election. But that base, that leaner segment, this is going to be a key factor for the mobilization.
Tim, just to temporarily zoom out from Arizona, 11 states are putting abortion on the ballot this fall. this is going to scramble the politics and the math, right? To Vicki's point, if you have voters who are coming out expressly to vote on this issue.
Yeah, you notice Nevada is also a neighboring state there. This is going to be another absolutely key state at the presidential level. We've seen this really ever since the overturn of Roe, that this issue has been a motivating issue for core Democratic voters, but also for more swingy voters with Democratic sympathies. It's not a total silver bullet issue. You know, we saw in Florida and Ohio in the midterm, for example, you know, there were cross-pressured voters that voted for a Republican candidate, but also, you know, kind of opposed abortion restrictions. So to Victoria's point, like Democrats are going to have to campaign on it. They're going to have to tie the issue to the candidates. But it definitely, yeah, I think all of the evidence is there that it's been a boost. And if you look at Arizona, Nevada, that just as a strategic matter is good, is for Biden. You know, if he has that upper Midwest blue wall, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, you know, now you have this sort of Mountain West area where this is going to be a key issue with two other swing states that are going to be important to him.
Victoria, one of the other reasons Arizona is, of course, interesting to me, interesting to you, is that it has the largest Latino population share of any battleground state. And you got an Axios Ipsos poll showing that Joe Biden is losing ground to Trump among Latino voters. This is something we have seen in polling. And so I come back to the question that is top of mind in homes like mine, and I'm sure in homes like yours, which is, why is this happening?
So what we're seeing with Latinos is kind of that migration toward Trump. But that latest poll that you cite, Alicia, also shows that while there's that disenchantment toward President Biden, that there's still a firm hold on core Democratic issues, namely not as restrictive immigration policy and support for abortion rights. So I think the problem here really centers on the lack of connection with the candidate, that President Joe Biden is not connecting with the Latino base like a George W. Bush did, even like President Barack Obama did, Clinton before that. So I think there's that problem. And this is where the Democratic Party is going to have to lean on surrogates, going to have to lean on down ballot. You have a strong Senate candidate in Ruben Gallego in Arizona. So that's going to have to be key, because President Biden is not going to move the needle with Latinos in Arizona. One could argue it might even hurt. So you're going to have to focus beyond that very top of the ticket to the Senate races, to the House races, and the trusted voices within the community to connect the dots.
Well, Tim, to this sort of broader question about like getting to know the candidate, because I think for some of us, we're like, he's been president for like 4 years. Like, how are we still in a getting to know you phase? You have NBC reporting that Biden is pushing a content over crowd strategy, sort of putting out social media videos of the president in small group settings instead of holding big rallies. And I wonder what you make of this approach.
You know, I think that it's okay. He's not going to get big crowds, so it's sort of an approach that he has to do. To me, it's more important. The content is fine. What I want to see from the content is Joe Biden in his element out with working class voters, you know, out with voters that are not, you know, just part of what people would think of as like kind of an elite liberal audience, right? And Joe Biden is good with those voters. It's his background with Scranton Joe. I think you can apply that to the Latino community, for example, in Arizona. I just think if you just look at the numbers, there's some people out there that mostly just generalizing working class Latino men that right now are saying they like Gallego and Trump, right? So how can you speak to those voters? I don't think you do need the big crowds, but Biden has to go and demonstrate that he cares about the issues that they care about, and hopefully Ruben can be helpful in carrying that message as well.
Hey everyone, MSNBC has a new and improved app. You'll get real-time alerts and analysis, live blogs, in-depth essays, video highlights, and the best 2024 election coverage. Download the new MSNBC app. Here's how to do it. You tap on the App Store on your phone. You hit search on the bottom right corner. You type in MSNBC. You click on the MSNBC app. You click on Get or the cloud icon and enjoy it.